Greetings comic lovers and welcome back to Casually Comics, the channel where we chat all things comics, from reviews of comics new and old, to history, to anecdotes, to really wherever our whims take us. Sometimes when you've been reading or dabbling in comics for a while, there are facts that you just stumble over and over again. The quick tidbits that populate the canonical landscape. One of those is the fact that the mutant Cable is actually Nathan Summers, the son of Cyclops, Scott Summers, and the clone of Jean Grey created by Mr. Sinister, Madeline Pryor. 'Cause Scott married that clone. A woman that looks exactly like my seemingly dead love. Yes, please, I do. However, this fact about Cable's backstory was not always in place for him. It actually wasn't part of the thought process when he was created. It came in after. There was a reveal and it was built up to, and clones. Clones for everyone. His clone plot was between him and the villain Strife. Strife was a really big deal in the 90s, but it's one of those characters who, if you weren't there, if you haven't gone back to reread some of that stuff, it can be like, Strife? So who was Cable initially, and why was he created? You're about to find out, but before we get started, I'm Sasha, and if you're enjoying this content, you know what to do. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so that you never miss a vid. Join us on this crazy comics journey. Also, for those of you who've been asking, I do not have a Patreon, but I have a Kofi, so if you're so inclined, please hit me up over there. It's always appreciated. If not, no worries, we have a man out of time to get to. Cable first debuted in the New Mutants number 87 back in 1990, and was created by Louise Simonson and Rob Liefeld. Some people will count New Mutants 86 as the first appearance, but he only appears in the teaser on the last page. You know what? No, only technically, but for all intents and purposes, issue 87 is what you want. Cable was actually created because of editorial issues. There was a fear that the New Mutants was stagnating, they were getting boring, they needed something to shake them up. And so then editor Bob Harris decided that the team needed a new leader, and he specifically wanted it to be someone completely different from their prior leader, Professor X. So writer Louise Simonson thought, who's the exact opposite of Charles? I know, a military leader. Harris liked the idea, and so he asked Liefeld to do some concept art. Apparently independently, both Liefeld and Simonson felt it would be cool if the character was a time traveler. So he always had that aspect going for him. A man at a time. I just love saying it because it could mean a lot of things, ranging from dramatic to mundane. You could either be talking about his adventures, slipping through the time stream, or the fact that he's late for work because he stopped to get a coffee. On designing the character, Liefeld had this to say. Oh yes, it's quote time. My favorite time. I was given a directive to create a new leader of the New Mutants. There was no name, no description besides a man of action, the opposite of Xavier. I created the look, the name, much of the history of the character. After I named him Cable, Bob suggested Quinn, and Louise had Commander X. Well, I'll tell you this, nothing says man of action like multiple pouches. You have to be doing lots of things to need that many pouches. What's in there? Whatever he needs. Also, Quinn, like as his base name or as his superhero name? Man of action, Quinn. It's not really 90s enough. It's certainly no Commander X. But I mean, that's too close to Professor X, so I'm glad they went with Cable. But I do see the thought process, because he's not a professor and a thinker, he's a leader, man of action, commander. So how did we get from man of action, Cable, to Cyclops' son, Cable? Well, Harris was going around from X book to X book, just looking to see if there was excitement and willing to hear any ideas of how to bring said excitement to the fore. And at this time, the books were all pretty decently interconnected, or at least had the potential to be. So when looking at what was going on over in X Factor, a team that Cyclops was on, it was decided that his son, then baby Nathan, would be sent to the future and raised there, and that he would ultimately be Cable. Though Fabian Nicieza, who would end up writing a lot of Cable, claims that it was the creative team that pitched it to Harris, and that he liked it so much that's why he ran with it. Rumor has it that Liefeld didn't love the decision, and Nicieza has been quite vocal about it not being his favorite editorial decision. He stated, I remember the Cable as baby Nathan thing as something that was grafted onto the character because Ghibli and Willis Portacio suggested it, and Bob liked it enough to convince Rob to go with it. I don't even remember if that's accurate or not, but it's how I recall that continuity tangle being initiated. I think Rob figured he could make it work or tweak it as needed as he went along. It wasn't necessarily a bad idea from an X continuity standpoint, but I always felt it was a bad idea from Cable's standpoint. It bogged him down way too much, and ultimately it bogged down Scott and Jean too. It is said that Liefeld actually wanted the character of Cable to be an older version of Cannonball, another member of the New Mutants, or at the very least for him to have a more fluid backstory. A character like Wolverine has had multiple fake origins, mysteries. I felt the same could be done with Cable. This dealt with something though that comics tend not to handle in the best of ways, and that is children and babies. They have a thing thing with younger characters like that. It kind of, what do we do with them? What's the end goal? We don't want them to distract from the action. Children aren't interesting. And this plot line employed the age-old tradition of just aging them up. If they're older / adults, there's more plots. And for this one, you have the added benefit that you don't have to just do a magical time skip between issues that's never addressed, like the Fantastic Four, or send them to space to age them up for no reason, like John Kent. So it was that in 1991, Nathan Summers was infected with the techno-organic virus that would see him being sent to the future, which was the only place that could cure him. There he would get his awesome metal arm. Techno-organic virus. Cybernetic eye, metal arm, just coolness. It causes you to be cooler. Okay, so that's dealt with. But what about some of the other plots and characters that had already been planned before this was added onto Cable? And for that we need to talk about Strife. Strife was a huge part of Cable's plot and a big villain at the time. And initially he was going to be Cable in a plot that had to be abandoned because of the whole Cable as Nathan Summers retcon. There had been much building up with Strife. In fact, you hadn't even seen his face until New Mutants issue 100. And at that point the big reveal was, oh my god, he looks exactly like Cable. Also, New Mutants issue 100 was incidentally the last issue of the New Mutants at the time. So if he couldn't be Cable, well then what was another solution? Well then we had to go to tried and true method. Clones. If you're curious about how he was also going to be Cable, they were going to be the same person from different points in the timeline, like very a la Heinlein. Some of this was because the backlash that this reveal brought, because you can't have sweet baby Nathan grow up to be a crazed supervillain. That doesn't go over well. Also, fun fact, Cable initially thought that he was the clone, because what's a clone plot without that cliche? Am I a real person or a clone? Cable being Cyclops' son has just always been a part of him for me, and so to learn about how it came about behind the scenes is to me fascinating. And does open up the question for me of what would a parallel world look like where he's not Cyclops' son? I mean, it is possible to largely ignore the Summers stuff, and some writers do. I mean, in the Cable and Deadpool, or Deadpool and Cable, depending upon when you're reading it, it is largely pushed aside for a decent portion of it. And Cable is still Cable. That comic was also incidentally written by Nicieza. However, there is a tendency to place him in plots involving the Summers family, but there are just lots of plots involving the Summers family in general. So what do you think? Are you a fan of the man out of time, I'm their son from the future and I'm older than my parents storyline? Usually, sometimes Cable is younger and I'm never here for it. Or are you more on the side of some of the complaints, that it ties him too much to the Summers mythos and doesn't allow him to grow as much as his own character? Also, Cable was the hugest deal in the 90s. He used to just appear everywhere. Case in point, our Capwolf video. He's just there tenuously. There's barely any reason for him to be there. Just like, this story isn't cool enough. What if Cable showed up? Tell me all your thoughts down below, and also let me know if you know of any other instances where a creator isn't exactly thrilled with the direction a character is taking and maybe you liked it or agreed with them. Just, share stories. And also please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks for taking some time of your day to discuss comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.